So Parsha's VaYetzei begins with the pasuk VaYetzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Charana. Yaakov left Be'er Sheva and went to Haran. The truth is that we already read at the end of last week's Parsha that Yaakov left Be'er Sheva and went to Haran. Why does it need to repeat this? So we know that Yaakov spent 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem ve'Ever before actually going to Haran. The Sfas Emes says before he left yeshiva to go to Haran, he came back to Be'er Sheva to say goodbye to his parents. And that's why it says again that he left Be'er Sheva and he went to Haran. The pasuk says, Vayifka b'makayim, vayolen sham, kivah hashemesh. He chanced upon the place and he slept there because the sun had come. The Gemara tells the story behind that pasuk. The Gemara says that Yaakov actually traveled all the way to Haran. When he realized that he had passed the Har HaMoriah and he had not davened, he said to himself, is it possible that I passed the place where my forefathers davened and I didn't daven? We know that Avraham davened at Har HaMoriah after the Akedah, and Yitzchak davened there when Eliezer came to bring him Rivka. It says that Yitzchak was davening in the field, and that was the field where he was davening in the Har HaMoriah. So Yaakov felt bad, and he turned back to go to Har HaMoriah. He had Kritzis Haderech, and he went very quickly, and he got there. When he got there, the pasuk says, Efsher Tzadik, the Gemara says, Efsher Tzadik Zeh Bola Beis Maloinai, Yipoter B'Leilina. Is it possible that this Tzadik will have come to my dwelling place and will leave without spending the night? And that's why it says, Kivah Hashem, she slept there because the sun came down. That means the sun came down before its normal time in order to make sure that Yaakov would not continue traveling on his way and go to Haran without spending the night there. And then, of course, he had the dream, the famous dream that everybody knows. So, the Be'er Mayim Chaim asks, Reb Chaim Chernovitzer asks, why did Yaakov actually pass the place that his forefathers davened without davening? How could that happen? He explains that Hashem wanted Yaakov to make a special trip to the Har HaMoriah in order to daven. He didn't want Yaakov to simply stop there on the way. So that's why he made him have Kritzis Haderech, and he arrived in Haran on the same day that he left Be'er Sheva. He didn't even notice Har HaMoriah because the whole road was, basically bunched up very tight, which is what Kritzis Haderech is in some cases. And when he came to Haran, he realized he had passed the Har HaMoriah and he went back. And that way, he went on a special trip just to Har HaMoriah. Now the question is, what is wrong with a tzaddik coming to the place of the Beis HaMikdash and leaving without spending the night? Avram did it after he davened for the Akedah. It says he went back with his servants to Be'er Sheva. Yitzchak, after davening in the field, met Rivka, and he presumably traveled with her and Eliezer back to their place in Hebron. So why was it so important for Yaakov specifically to spend the night? It's possible that Hashem wanted him to have the dream there, which he had, but it sounds like there was something special about spending the night specifically. So, Reb Aryeh Leib Tzintz explains, he was a big Rav and wrote a lot of Sfarim in the early 1800s in Poland. He explains the meaning of the pasuk is that Hashem said, is it possible that Yaakov will come and daven and not establish Tfilas Maariv? Yipoter B'Leilina, he'll leave without establishing the tefillah that we say before we go to sleep? No, it's not possible. Hashem said, I'm going to make the sun set early, and therefore he will establish Tfilas Maariv. So this leads us to discuss the tefillah of Maariv, which the Gemara says was established by Yaakov. From Daven Shachris, the morning after Sodom was destroyed, Yitzchak davened mincha, like we said, when he was in the field. And Yaakov davens here Maariv. And the question is, on the simple surface of the pasuk, it seems that he davened before the sunset. VaYifka b'makom is interpreted to mean, and he davened, because there's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu where al tifka bi means do not daven. So the pasuk says VaYifka b'makom, he davened in the place, Vayolan sham, and then he slept there, kivo hashemesh, because the sun had set. Like we quoted from the Gemara earlier, that he went back to daven, and then Hashem said, how could he leave without spending the night? And he made the sun set. It sounds like the sun set after he davened. So Tosfos says this is a source for the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you're allowed to daven Maariv an hour and a quarter before the sun sets. So he davened it before the sunset, and that was already Maariv. Now the Chachamim say that you have to wait until dark to daven Maariv, and according to their opinion, the Maharal explains that before Yaakov davened, Hashem said, is it possible that this tzaddik will come and daven and leave without spending the night? And therefore Hashem made the sun set before he davened. Okay, so let's discuss a little bit more about the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim about davening an early Maariv. So it's the first Mishnah in the 4th chapter of Brachas, where it says that according to the Chachamim, you can daven mincha until the Erev, till the evening. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can only daven mincha until plag ha-mincha. Now, what does the evening mean? Some say it means actual nightfall, seisak echavim, when the stars come out. That is the opinion of Rashi, the way he is explained by the Shagas Aryeh. Whereas some say that it means sunset. That's the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina. In practice, it is best to daven Maariv before Shkia, to the extent that the Mishnah Berurah says if you're going to only have a minyan after Shkia, it's better to daven before Shkia without a minyan. Others disagree and say that it's better to daven with a minyan after Shkia, as long as it will be before Tzeisak Lechavim, before the stars come out. But certainly if Shkia passed, Vidi Eved, you can rely on the opinions that say you can daven after Shkia, preferably in the beginning of Ben Hashmashas, because as it gets towards actual night, there are more opinions that say that it's too late for Mincha. But b'shas adchak, you can even rely on the opinions that you could daven up until Seisek Lechavim. Okay, so that's all the opinion of the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda says you can daven until Mincha, until Plag HaMincha. What's the reason for this difference? For this difference of opinion? The Chachamim say that you can daven until nightfall, however we define nightfall, as we said before, because that's when you were allowed to bring the Korban Tamid. Korban Tamid, Mincha is scheduled according to the schedule of the Korban Tamid. You could sprinkle the blood until the sun sets. That's what it says in the Gemara, and the sprinkling of the blood is the main aspect of the kapara of the Korban. So therefore their opinion is clear. Why would Rabbi Yehuda say that you must finish an hour and a quarter before that? Plag ha-mincha, by the way, means half of mincha. Mincha katana is the last 2.5 hours of the day. Plag ha-mincha is an hour and a quarter because it's half of mincha. Plag ha-mincha. So what is the reason for Rabbi Yehuda? Tosfos says that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the mincha service corresponds to the ketores. Like it says, Tikon tfilosi ketores masas kapai minchas orev. That my prayer should be established for you like ketores, the mincha of the evening, I mean to say towards evening. And that the ketores is brought earlier in the afternoon. before Plag HaMincha. The Vilna Gaon says that although in theory the Tamid could be brought until nightfall, but in practice it was not brought at that time, because after the Tamid itself was brought, they also had to bring the chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, the daily meal offering of the Kohen Gadol. They had to pour the nesachim of the Tamid. The Leviim had to sing the Shir Shel Yoim. And finally, they had to light the menorah all before sunsets. So therefore, in practice, they would bring the Tamid well before that. And that's why he says that you have to finish Mincha before Plag HaMincha. Now, whenever the time for Mincha is over, that's when the time for Maariv begins. Like the Mishnah says, Tfilas ha'erev ein lo keva. The evening service has no fixed time. The Vilna Gaon explains that means that whenever Mincha finishes, whether at Plag HaMincha according to Rabbi Yehuda, or at Erev, at the evening according to the Chachamim, whenever it finishes, that's when Maariv starts. The reason that Maariv has no fixed time is because Maariv corresponds to the burning of the fats and the limbs of the Tamid. And whenever they finish sacrificing the Tamid, that's when they would start burning the fats and the limbs. So as far as these two opinions, let's just review. According to the Chachamim, you can daven Mincha until the evening, however we define evening, and Maariv after that. According to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, you can daven Mincha until Plag HaMincha and Maariv after that. The Gemara says that because the halacha was not stated like either opinion, Da'avid Kemar Ovid or Da'avid Kemar Ovid. If you follow one opinion, that's fine. If you follow the other opinion, that's also fine. So technically, Plag HaMincha is a no man's land. It is a time that could belong to the day, to the previous day, in terms of it being time for Mincha. It could belong to the next day in terms of it being time for Maariv. Now, what if you want to switch off and follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion on some days and the Chacham's opinions on other days? Well, if you daven Mincha before Plag HaMincha and you daven Maariv after evening begins, then everybody's happy and there's no argument. That's fine. The question is, if you sometimes daven Mincha after Plag HaMincha at a time that Rabbi Yehuda considers it Maariv time, and other times you daven Maariv at that time, which is good according to Rabbi Yehuda, but not good according to the Chachamim because they consider that daytime. So there are three opinions about this question. First opinion, which is that of the Rosh. In the name of Rav Hai Gaon. This seems to be the opinion of the Rambam as well, although it's not 100% clear, that you are not allowed to switch at all. You must choose your opinion and follow that. So if you daven Mincha usually close to nightfall, that's following the opinion of the Chachamim. You can never daven Maariv before nightfall. If you daven Maariv before nightfall, you can never daven Mincha after Plag HaMincha. Because otherwise, you're called a fool who walks in darkness. Do you consider this daytime or nighttime, one or the other? You can't decide randomly to sometimes consider it day and sometimes night. There are opinions, and this is the opinion of the Ra'ah, as well as the opinion of the Mordechai. They say that you are allowed to follow conflicting opinions as long as you do so on different days. In other words, even if you usually daven Mincha close to evening, if on this particular day you did not, you daven Mincha early, you can daven Maariv at that time. Even if you usually daven Maariv early before nightfall, you can daven Mincha at that time on a different day, as long as you make sure to daven Maariv after nightfall on that particular day. Now, if you were to daven both Mincha and Maariv on the same day within Plag HaMincha, well then, the Ra'ah says you would be called a posheya, a sinner, because that is taking two contradictory leniencies. And the Gemara in Eruvin says a person who takes two contradictory leniencies is called a posheya, is called a sinner. Finally, we have the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, who is quoted in the first Tosfos in Shas, Brachos Beis Amud Aleph. The Tosfos beginning with the words Me'emasai. Rabbeinu Tam says that because tefillah is a rabbinic obligation, the rabbis were lenient, and they said you can daven mincha and Maariv both during this time, even though it appears to be contradictory. You're accepting the Chachamim's opinion first and Rabbi Yehuda's opinion next. And even though it's difficult to understand, but davening is a rabbinic obligation and they were lenient about it. In terms of practical halacha, the Mechaber and the Ramah agree that one should choose one opinion and stick to it. This is based on the Rosh, as we mentioned earlier. One should not switch it back and forth on a daily basis. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. First of all, b'diavad, if you already did daven Maariv at a time, you usually daven mincha or vice versa. B'diavad, it's okay. B'shas hadchak, it's okay. If you need to, you won't be able to daven later for some reason, that's also okay. As well as on Erev Shabbos. In order to be able to take in Shabbos early, which is a special mitzvah, the Alter Rebbe, the Magen Avram, and others say you are allowed to daven Maariv early, even if you daven mincha usually at that time. Arizal himself did not do that, and many in Chabad do not do that until this day. They are careful to always wait until evening. But nevertheless, it is permissible halachically speaking. Now, this, of course, is based on the second opinion that I mentioned earlier, the opinion of the Ra'ah and Mordechai. So we rely on them in those cases. And then there are some communities that have the minhag to daven mincha and Maariv both within Plag HaMincha. Although the main halacha is not like that opinion, like we mentioned earlier, nevertheless, those that have that custom are allowed to continue with the custom because some say that it's permissible to rely on the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam if the minyan would otherwise not materialize. If people wouldn't come to daven mincha earlier, or people wouldn't stay to daven Maariv later, and so on. If that's the only way the minyan can function, then that opinion can be explained and that custom can be understood. Now, a person who usually davens mincha during Plag HaMincha, and he happens to be in a shul where they're davening an early Maariv, that Tzemach Tzedek says he should not change his custom and daven with them. He should rather wait and daven later. All of the above discussion did not address the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema. It was about the mitzvah of davening Maariv. As far as Kriyas Shema is concerned, almost all the poskim agree that the time for reading the Shema is actual night, actually after the stars come out. And therefore, if a person does daven an early Maariv, they must repeat the Shema. The Rebbe says that those that do so on a daily basis, those that daven Maariv early on a daily basis, so that every day they have to repeat the Shema, it may be that it's possible for them to fulfill this obligation when they read the Shema before going to sleep, having in mind that they're doing it for the sake of the mitzvah. However, people who do not do this on a daily basis may not wait until then, because we're afraid that they may not remember to have that in mind. They may just say the Shema just for protection, as we usually do. And therefore, they should rather say the Shema earlier, certainly before they eat. I wish you all a good Shabbos.